Well, hello and welcome to church at First Church Ipswich. I'm Rebecca. I'm the minister and part of this congregation, and on behalf of the whole congregation, I welcome you, and on behalf of the deacons, on behalf of Anita Kupras, her wonderful choir, the Labyrinth Choir, has been offering us their music this fall, and I appreciate them so much, and I appreciate this congregation so much. And I have a message for you today as we think about the end of the time of studying St. Francis and the beginning of November and that fine line between life and death, that we cherish how thin it is as we come towards the beginning of November. I'm thinking about all of those things, and I have a message about compassion for you today. Now, we have a member of the church who kind of got lost in the shuffle. A member of the church noticed that her house was for sale and was looking to see where she'd gone. We knew that she was struggling with her memory, and we realized we didn't know quite where she'd been moved, and the search was on. We were trying to find her, and when I saw her daughter-in-law, I said, "Do you know where she's gone?" I'm going to call her Cicely for the sake of the sermon, and I'll tell you that the daughter-in-law wasn't quite sure where she'd gone, but that she said, "Try the nursing homes in Beverly," and that seemed like a good idea, to start searching in the nursing homes, and I went from nursing home to nursing home. I was searching in the nursing homes in Danvers, the nursing homes in Beverly, and we called them all, asking if they'd seen Cicely, and they hadn't. All the ones who could answer us said that they hadn't, and so then we ended up at this next point of trying to find her by going to them, the ones that couldn't tell us if she was there or not. I put on my clergy collar, and I started driving around all the nursing homes in Danvers, and the first one, I got to the front door, and there were people waiting at the front door for friends to come see them, people waiting for their churches or their synagogues, their congregations to come visit. And I got to the front door and was able to greet a lot of good people who were there ready for a visit, and got all the way up to the front staff, and the staff took my temperature and gave me a clean mask and got me ready to go in. And then they said, "Now, who are you looking for?" And I said, "Cicely." And they were like, "Oh, she's not here." And so then we went to the next one that we were hoping maybe would have Cicely. And again, the wonderful people at the front door, all these people ready to talk to you, to greet you, these people who've been there, who live there, who've been there for a while, who are hungry for a good word, a word of welcome, a bit of kindness. And I asked them if they were friends with Cicely, if they knew her, and then I got myself back to the desk and asked if they had Cicely there, and I was disappointed again. She wasn't there, and was glad for the chance to visit the other folks instead who were there waiting. For most ministers, there's always this tension between enjoying the people who are right there when we go to a hospital or a facility, and getting ourselves to the members of our congregation who are waiting or who we hope we can see. And I decided to just enjoy all the folks there looking for a good word. And then I finally got to the last nursing home on my list, and I was so hopeful that she'd be there. I was already worn out from this day of visiting lots of other people on my way, and there we were at the Hunt Rehab in Danvers. What a nice place, and I was able to get to the front desk to greet the other people there, the fellow in the wheelchair with the Red Sox cap and the lady in the red sweater. And then I got to the desk, and I was like, "I'm looking for Cicely. She's a member of my church." And they saw me. They could see that it had been a long morning. I'd been out looking. They could see I was a little defeated. And when they told me she wasn't there, I just stood there and took a deep breath, and they were like, "Okay, we're going to help you find Cicely." So they all got out their phones. It was these three wonderful women, the women at the desk and a nurse, I think, on the floor. These three wonderful women all got out the landline, their cell phones, and they just started calling. And they called facility after facility looking for my Cicely. And it was their 14th call when they found her. And I was able to drive to a different city. I was able to drive out of that city where I thought she was to the city where she is, and get myself through past the front desk, past the bingo game, all the way back to the parlor where she indeed was sitting with some of her new friends watching TV. And we had a really good visit. In the story of the Valley of Dry Bones, the story from the 37th chapter of the book of Ezekiel, we hear about what it's like for Ezekiel to have this vision of death all around him and disappointment and sorrow and despair. He walks to this battlefield. He sees it in the middle of the Babylonian exile, this vision that he doesn't expect. He just, this image of a place where everyone has died and it's just dust and bones. And he's there like looking around trying to figure out what he's supposed to do with all of it. And he hears this voice saying, prophesy to the bones. And for Ezekiel, he's not sure what it means to be prophesying to bones. He's definitely having a bit of a dream. It's definitely not one of the stories in the Bible that we're meant to take literally, if we're meant to take any of them literally. This is definitely one that's it's figurative, it's metaphor, it's imagery. It's this great, like picture of a place where there's been a huge war, where many, many people have died, and there are all their bones just drying in the sun and bleached. And he hears a voice from God saying, prophesy, and he thinks, what? Can these bones live? And God says, just prophesy. And I like to think what his thought process is. What does he say to those bones? Does he say, live, O bones? Does he say, war, be over? Does he say, let us get along? Does he say, compassion? That would be the bottom line for us, the rule for us all. Would we live with compassion, that there would be no more battlefields? But he starts to prophesy. We don't know exactly what he said, but let's for the sake of this story retelling, let's say he starts saying compassion. And the bones start to jiggle and re-knit themselves together. He says, his prophecy again, let's say he says compassion, and the bones start to put themselves all back in line. And then eventually he says his prophesying again, compassion, let's say. And then there's skin winding around these bones and muscles. And it's such a wild story. It's a good story for this time of year, that when we've all decorated our front lawns with bones. I like to think that this perhaps is the story that goes with that, hope, compassion, that there would be no more bones out in fields drying after a terrible war. But there you have these knitted together bodies, but they're not alive. And then God finally says to him in his visions and his dreaming and channeling the holiness that's God's breath and clarity and vision, God finally says to him, now call to the winds from the north and the south and the east and the west. Call to them that the bones would have breath, that they would be alive. And so Ezekiel starts doing that. He starts thinking, wind, oh north wind, oh west wind, oh south wind, oh east wind, come and fill these bones with spirit, with air. And then of course the winds blow all over the battlefield. And the winds blow right into all those bodies. And in the vision of Ezekiel, the bodies come to life. We always think of that. One of the most holy names for God is breath. And one of the most sacred names for holiness is this spirit, this wind, this word ruach in Hebrew that means breath and wind and spirit. And this beautiful image from Ezekiel from the Hebrew Bible, this image of the wind blowing across with compassion to wake up all these ones who've died in battle. I love to think of that vision of Ezekiel blowing the hope and the winds back to us, the life back to the bodies, the animation back to what looked like it was just lost. Because that kind of prophesying of compassion, of possibility, of interconnection, of forgiveness, of coming alive again where it looks like it's just going to be wars forever and ever, is really at the very heart of the religions that give us this story. And this story is central to the Jewish tradition, central to the Christian tradition. We love these stories. It's a part of the Islamic tradition too. It's such a vivid image of what can be, from a war to a waking up of people connecting to each other in life and joy and forgiveness and compassion. I love to think of that. It's the month where we've talked again and again about St. Francis and how he keeps telling us in his many, many ways to find our voices for each other, to find ways to forgive each other, to be present and alive and ruach, spirit and wind to each other. And I love this week as we finish thinking about St. Francis when he says, where there's injury, pardon. Because what better story from Scripture than this field full of bones injured beyond recognition, that there might be pardon, and there might be compassion, and there might be life. So back to my Cecily, this member of our church, who I finally found in her parlor at her nursing home. We sat down together, and I showed her some pictures from the church, and I showed her a letter I'd brought her from the church, and we were enjoying the pictures and the image of the tree that stands beside the church and the image of the church itself. And I started to say to her, like, how do you draw a tree? You're a wonderful artist. And she kept saying, any way you want, And I said, how do I draw this church? And she said, you just start. And so I just started, and I'm not an artist, and she is, but it was very fun to be writing all over her letter, making images, making a mess, really, all over the written word were these visual images instead. And I said, could you draw a tree by starting at the roots, or would you start at the trunk? She said, you start where you start. And so I started drawing the tree, too. And so we had the church, and we had a tree, and they were swirling, funny images. You could almost see the wind blowing around in the tree, swirling the leaves, as it does so wonderfully in the fall. And when I finished covering her whole letter with badly drawn doodles that I did, that she loved, we got out the letter that our Women's Guild had written to her, and I read her the messages every member of the guild had said to her. And she liked the messages, but even more, she liked the names. She loved hearing the names of the people who'd written to her. She would just say, oh, with each name I read, oh, that kind of gratitude that she has, that she's living with now, that deep, powerful sense of love and joy and bliss. My friend Pamela says that all the new research about loving and living with people with Alzheimer's says that your job is to meet them where they are, not to be correcting them, not to be changing people's minds or telling them what's different than what they think, not to be harsh or cross or impatient, but to just meet people right where they are in the reality that they're in, and celebrate that with them, and just enjoy it, be playful with it. And I love that model, that teaching of how to be present, how to be with compassion, receiving it from the people in the community and giving it back when you get to be with them. It's such a lovely gift to draw pictures all over somebody's letter if they're not going to read their letter anymore. It's such a lovely gift to listen to them, too, teaching you how to draw when you think you're not an artist. And so I had a powerful day listening and learning and enjoying the energy of our Cicely, this leader of our church, teaching us yet again what the deepest art is of creativity and compassion and connection. And I thought after I got home that I should give thanks to the people of that Hunt Rehab Center, to just reach back to them to say, you saved my day. I was so exhausted and you helped me so much. And so I called them and I reached Donna, who said she'd give my message too to Sharon and Valerie. The three of them had been the ones who'd helped me. And I just said, Donna, how did you do that? I was so overwhelmed. You were like such a bright spark in my day. You saved my day. You saved the church. And she said, sometimes you just need someone to help you. And then she said, it's happened to me before. We do just need someone to help us sometimes. I think that's the heart of the message of the church. It's the heart of the message of Francis. It's surely the heart of the message of Ezekiel in the Valley of the Bones. Sometimes you just need someone to say, come back, O winds from the west and the east and the south and the north. Come back and blow all around us and bring us hope again in the battlefields that are the real, tangible devastations, and also the ones in our hearts. Sometimes we just need someone to help us and to bring us that little, big, small, huge gesture of compassion. So I thought in conclusion I would sing you the song from Crossing the Bar, which is a song that our church learned when we were working for the memorial service for Bob Pigeon. And it's this poem by Tennyson that's been set. There's several tunes that have been set with it, but I love especially the folky, beautiful version that we sang when Bob Pigeon died. So it goes like this. Sunset and evening star and one great call for me, and may there be no moaning at the bar when I put out to sea. When I put out to sea, when I put out to sea, and may there be no moaning of the bar when I put out to sea. Thanks be to God.
Praise
There was a day when the crowds had gathered for healing. It was probably like a New Testament version of that valley of dry bones, because everyone was broken. And everyone realized Jesus could offer healing to them in various ways, in some ways with the miracle of him touching them, in other ways with his compassionate connection to their eyes, and in other ways his company for their loneliness, and in other ways he helped them find each other in community. In the middle of all of that, they kind of ran out of food, as the story goes. There were 5,000 of them there by the lakeside, and they suddenly realized that there wasn't any plan for food. There was no caterer, there was no feast. And one little boy had 2 loaves and 5 fish. And Jesus invited that boy to take that loaf, those 2 loaves and that fish, and to break it and to offer it. And so the boy took up his bread that was in his basket, and he started to break it and offer it. And then Jesus took one of his loaves and broke it and gave thanks to God for it and offered it to the people. And there was this miracle that happened next, because they all started sharing. You know, I like to think that when the boy opened his bag and his basket, and when Jesus took a loaf and broke it up so that there'd be pieces for all the people in the crowd to eat, that a lot of other people who actually did have some food tucked in their own bags went and got their loaves too and their offerings and started breaking it and sharing it. That there was this great potluck, this great feast of plenty when it had seemed like everyone was going to be hungry. Religion is like that. That's one of the best good ideas in Christianity, that people can share and they can be that breath of wind blowing across the 4 ways for each other, that ruach, that spirit, that compassion. When we are all at our best, that heart of sharing and time with each other and helping someone who's standing at your front desk who can't find someone she's looking for, like just to give her some help. Every time we reach out in compassion to someone else, we're doing that good work that this sacrament calls us to do. And so I invite you then, in your many ways and places, when you break bread, to reach it out to the other and offer some to someone near you, and also to receive the kindness and compassion of someone nearby. I invite you in the name of Christ to be able to receive and to give and to open up your heart in love. And we remember how on the night when Jesus was betrayed, he had broken bread for his people, and then he took the cup and said, "This is my body and my blood, shed for you for the forgiveness of sins and the healing of nations." Like that valley of dry bones that looks like there's no hope left at all. And yet a prophesying prophet, man, Ezekiel, speaker, wise one could bring that into beautiful focus, that there could be an end to those valleys of dry bones. There could be a beginning of something brand new. And so in this eve of the bridge between life and death again and life again, this eve of the All Souls and the remembering of the many beloved who've died, who've gone on before us, and this eve of remembering all the battlefields of all the world, I invite you to a feast of the bridge between life and death and life again, of the bridge between heaven and earth and heaven again, of the company of saints and souls, of the standing up beings on the battlefield, of the goodness and compassion and sharing in each of our lives and hearts. I invite you to this feast. And when we have finished eating, we will look at the crumbs on our hands and enjoy them, this abundant earth which yet feeds us so well despite it all. Friends and family, may the peace of the winding road be under your feet. May the peace of the shining stars be over your heads. May the peace of the warm wind, the deep wind, the four winds be at your back and in your face and on your left side and on your right side. And may the deep peace of the Prince of Peace be with you, body, mind, and spirit, this day and every day. Go in peace. Amen.